Greetings. Chapter 4, Conceptualization and Measurement, contains a lot of material, and a lot of that material I think will become more understandable as you read actual research studies. I think that's probably one of the better ways to understand all these terms and concepts is to look at examples. Examples that will provide you a clear understanding of how reliability is established, for example, or how validity is determined. Your authors start by defining a concept as a mental image that summarizes a set of similar observations, feelings, or ideas, and they provide some examples such as poverty, social control, strain. In my own work, I look at the idea of violentization, a process of someone becoming violent, based on Lonnie Athens' work. And certainly we can see this whole idea of a concept when we try to look at violence or different types of violence. When we look at the concept of alienation, or we look at the concept of, let's say, drug abuse, and the main feature here that I think is important to understand is the process that we go through to clearly define our terms. Your authors define operationalization as the process of specifying the operations or measures that will indicate the value of a variable. I run into that situation in my work, again, with violentization theory, when I talk about different types of violence, and also when I talk about the stages of violentization. That in my work, I need to clearly define what types of characteristics or behaviors are involved with, for example, brutalization versus, let's say, virulency. And so what becomes important here, again, is to be clear in defining our terms. So basically, when we talk about that we measure, let's say, violence, anyone that reads our study will know what we're talking about, what was included as violence and what was excluded as violence. So again, you'll see that in a lot of studies. Sometimes it's a little bit easier. We define gender as male or female, but then it could get complex if we have additional categories. Levels of measurement. One of the interesting features about levels of measurement is that it's just kind of thrown in here, and students often wonder, well, what's the relevance? I think what we'll find much later, and certainly in a statistics course, you'll find that levels of measurement is very relevant in determining what type of statistical procedures you can use. A nominal level of measurement basically is a category, such as gender, which would be male or female. Basically, nominal variable is a name that we would give to a particular variable of interest. There's not a mathematical nature to that, in the sense that communities, Orlando, Winter Park, Maitland, Altamont Springs, those are nominal level variables. Ordinal level variables basically have some ranking, if you will, but we don't know the difference, really, a true difference between those ranks. For example, a scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Is there real? Is it the same difference from? We may number that, let's say 1 through 6, but is there a difference between 2 and 3, and let's say in 5 and 6? We don't really know that. So ordinal measures. So one example I like to talk about is races, where you have someone who came in first, second, or third, but that doesn't mean that they came in exactly in a way that they had equal intervals between them. No, not at all. That you could have someone who ran, a marathon in 2.5 hours and came in first, then the second person in 2 hours 36 minutes, and then the third person 4 hours. So, ordinal measures, think of, low, medium, high. So they're helpful, but we don't know the exact nature of the differences between those intervals. Interval measures, they will basically have uh, fixed measurement units, but they don't have an absolute 0 point. The example often given is temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, but also I think IQ scores is very relevant as well. And then finally, the ratio measure has a true absolute 0 point, such as income, or your authors point out the number of drinks an individual has consumed in one sitting. They could have 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And we'll see how this becomes relevant when we get into focus on creating graphs and charts and measures in statistical analysis, looking at, for example, the mean, median, mode. And we get toward the end of the semester. Your authors also discuss assessing validity, and this is extremely important, and we'll see this come up again and again throughout the semester. Basically, what we're asking there is a measure, according to your authors, is a measure, or a measure is valid if it measures what it is intended to measure. Does it measure what it's supposed to measure? And they provide some examples or different types of validity, and then some examples. For example, face validity, content validity, criterion validity, and construct validity. And they also discuss briefly discriminant validity. And so I think what's important there is to understand those terms, but then to see that many times when we're conducting research and we want to look at the validity, a lot of times we will select the types of validity based on our questions and the nature of our measurement tools. And you find, for example, here I have the manual for the Parenting Stress Index, the Occupational Stress Inventory, the Life Stressors and Social Resources Inventory, and the Coping Resources Inventory. These are all used in the mental health field, and they have validity and reliability studies presented. So I know that this, for example, a Parenting Stress Index measures what it's supposed to measure. I also know, for example, when I conduct a study using this, that it's valid and it's reliable. But I also know, for example, that these different variables within this stress parenting stress index form are actually measuring different constructs. And so, for example, there's a child domain score, and there's social support, there's parental attachment, depression. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. So there's child domain and parent domain and life stress. Those are the three main areas of interest. And then, for example, under the child domain, there's different variables that are measured, such as adaptability, acceptability, demandingness, mood, hyperactivity, reinforcement of parent. And the parent domain has variables such as depression, attachment, restrictions of roles, sense of competence, social isolation, relationship with spouse, and parent health. And there's life stress, which has 19 items on there. But what they've successfully done in validating this measurement tool is showing that this measures what it's supposed to measure. So they do a variety of things here. For example, they show that their constructs are related to other constructs in the research that have already been demonstrated to work. They also show that it's related to the theory that is presented. They also have a lot of research that has been done in the field showing that the stress index variables relate to other relevant areas that they should be related to, and are not strongly correlated or related to ones that they are not, that would be irrelevant to the measure. And they also, you can see that looking at the content of the particular variable under study, that it does contain the relevant characteristics that we would expect to go along with that particular variable. And so my recommendation is to find a measurement tool, and then look at the reliability and validity studies. Reliability is also very important, and this is when a measure yields consistent scores or observations on different occasions, that it's reliable. One of the interesting examples I always thought about, I always think about reliability and validity when I go to the grocery store at Publix. They have a big scale. I have no idea why they have scales in Publix, but they do. I asked them once, and they had no idea. But anyway, what I like to do is to get I like to get, for example, let's just say I get 7 pounds of groceries, right? And I'm carrying my bags, and I see that scale. Well, I get on that scale, right? So that scale, the measure of my true weight now is not valid, right? Because it's going to measure 7 pounds more. Because every time I get my 7 pounds of groceries, I get the same groceries, let's say, every time, because I eat the exact same food every time, 7 pounds of food every week, let's say, and I get on that scale, and it's 7 pounds more than I really weigh. But it consistently measures, so it's reliable, but it's not a valid measure. So it's important to have both reliability and validity in these studies. And what's also fun to do is when I'm on the scale, and I'm looking, wow, that's kind of odd. And people will say, oh, excuse me, sir, but your groceries weigh a certain amount. You have to subtract that. And I'm thinking, so they understand the concepts of reliability and validity quite well, even though they may not use those terms. And there's different types of reliability: internal consistency, alternate forms, retest, test, retest, and inter-rater reliability. So, for example, with inter-rater reliability, if you have 3 people coding whether or not violence is presented in kids' movies, then you want to see if the 3 coders came up with the same results, to see how they correlated, how close were they. Usually you don't get perfect agreement, but you want to see if you get high agreement, then it's pretty reliable in that sense. And of course, your authors talk briefly about improving reliability and validity, and focusing on the nature of individuals versus collective units. And so again, I think that really the key here is, in putting this all together, is to read some of the articles that are linked to your textbook, the free articles from the matrix that I have linked in the announcement to all the articles that Sage Publications is kind enough to provide for us. You can see some examples of reliability and validity, and how the researchers do that and come to their conclusions. And this wraps up this video. Thank you.